Okay, I guess it's 10:30, so we've officially started the session, which means everything that anyone says will be recorded for all of prosperity's sake from here on out. I have to look at my slides because I forget who I am. I'm Dan Nagy, the little lost boy from the Legal Information Institute over at Cornell. Shut up. This is my shtick, and I'm going with it. I'm the assistant engineer for the Legal Information Institute out of Cornell's Law School. And today I'm going to tell you a story about wandering through the cloud, one man's journey to outsourcing some of his infrastructure, some of the organization's infrastructure, out to what has now become the ubiquity of the word cloud. These days, if you were to watch popular media, whatever, everything is out to the cloud. If you have a family that's being unruly for family pictures, you can take a picture and then magically go to the cloud where your family is now presentable. And if you're bored in the airport, you can now go to the cloud and you're instantly entertained for hours and hours in the terminal of JFK or something like that. But it's now become the favorite hammer for us to smack everything with. I guess we got tired of the word cyber and we needed a new word, so we came up with the word cloud because cyber sounded old and cyberpunkish, and cloud sounds new, and so we've started using the word cloud, and it's permeated through the modern society. So now everything, instead of going to the internet, is going to the cloud. And consumer-based stuff is radically different than the solution-based stuff that the system engineers and an organization like ours works with. And it's become the favorite hammer to smack things with. The unruly family, or for that matter, an infrastructure problem that you're having, or data limits that you're bumped up against. And it seems now that if we just throw the cloud at anything, it solves all of our problems, or does it? And that's what we started using the cloud we started using the cloud and started looking at it around 2008, and then started running our first production stuff out in a cloud in around 2009. It was our topics collection, a collection of legal terms, definitions, things like that. When we say "are the cloud," what we're talking about particularly is the Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud, or EC2.
So it used to be
and
that
that's
the way
what
people
we're using for our cloud. There's other service providers out there. We chose this one for a couple of reasons. One of the main reasons we chose it is because we gained a partner about that point in time called Justy. And Nick is sitting in the front row, and he was amazingly helpful. They were amazingly generous with their time and their expertise using this Amazon cloud. And we were also at that point in time in the market to get away from some of the brick and mortar servers that we had. It was time for us to replace. They were getting up near mean failure, a couple years old, and we were looking to spend. We were going to have to make an investment one way or the other in something. And this also came at a crossroads of where we were moving from we call our flat architecture, which is just HTML served up to Apache, moving to a content management.
And so when we tried to determine what our ideal solution
anyway, our cloud,
we determined that
we have one other layer on top of it. And when we started using it, the Amazon
that it would have a small learning curve,
dashboard, the management console you would use was kind of primitive. So there was a company out there called RightScale, and what they did is they gave us a very nice, clean front end for dealing with the Elastic with EC2, and you could do things with them that you couldn't do at that point in time with Amazon. You could automatically run scripts. They really helped out getting database servers up and replicating immediately on boot. So you had these things called write scripts you could build in to your images as you started them.
The
consensus seems to be now, if you were to do the same thing over again today, that you probably wouldn't need something like RightScale. The Amazon front-end tools have gotten good enough that you probably wouldn't want to go with something like RightScale. There are other tools that help you. There's something called whitelist, which automates some of the more arcane things for you, like making snapshots. But that's the way we use it. We just have the Amazon EC2 with the RightScale front end. So, and I don't want to go into this because, I don't know how many of you are using it. I don't know, and I don't want to restate stuff you already know, but I got to go into a little bit just to lay the groundwork. The mechanics of the EC2 service is you start with something called an image, And it's kind of it's basically a server at rest. It's a piece of data that just sits there, or a chunk of data sits there and does nothing. From an instance, and you can liken that image to a bootable DVD with an operating system. So it's not doing anything. So you stick it in the drive and turn it on, then it's an operating system. And from an image, you start an instance, and the instance in this case is synonymous with server. And once that exists, it exists in it's a virtualized server. And once you have the instance, you can treat it. It is yours. There's no sudo. You are the sole owner of that instance, just layered on top of the Amazon server.
Have the students use mobile devices for
and then, as far as
this,
there's a different kind of instances.
Like, I don't know,
the
like
first
Time
one is the AMI, Amazon Machine image,
Does anyone do that?
image, and that's kind of ephemeral. That was the first kind that we ever had when we started working
just
with it. And the way that one works is, again, you have
Just
the
offer
image.
it for access
You boot
and
the
support
instance from the
that.
image. You get about 9 gigs of storage. The caveat to that one, to that type of running instance, is that it's very ephemeral. That initial 9 gigs that you have is not persistent. If you reboot it, if you terminate it, restart it, the stuff goes away. Any accounts, any new things you've layered or installed on it, because it is your instance, you do with it what you want. When you turn it off, it would then disappear. What you used to have to do is get that instance running and then do something called baking a snapshot from it. So you would then take it, you would start with an image, make an instance, and then you would take that instance and take it back to an image so that you would have, it would be persistent for you. All the changes you made, you would have in place. If you wanted to clone it, start another one, that one croaks, you need to start up another one, you would just have to use that instance to do it. Now what they have is they have something called EBS, which is Elastic Block Stores. I'll talk about that in a minute.
But I use it with my
What the
iPad
EBS
all the time.
instances are
I'm running
is they're
my
basically
advanced
more of
research
your
course
traditional
from here
server.
through the
It
iPad
acts like
and was on High
a
the
regular
other
server.
day,
This
and
changes you
it's
make
just
to it are
fun on the
written
iPad.
back to persistent storage.
I actually
So
work
if for
with
some reason you have to
law firm,
reboot
the
or
attorneys
restart that
want to
instance,
check
terminate it and restart it, you
everything
would get your
on
data
backwards.
back out of the EBS Store
Or
type
on
of
the
instance.
iPhones.
You
And
can
so it's,
still
like, kind of
create an image from it,
frustrating because a lot
which
of
allows you
times
to
they're-
clone
we
it,
have,
move it around.
IP authentication for a lot
But
of things.
it's a little bit,
So it's a little bit difficult.
the other kind filled me
You're
with
from
a,
librarian or IT person?
well, we'll say
wow.
dread, because it was very, if something went down,
Yeah,
you always
I
got a
was gonna say,
little nervy about getting the
exciting. I
stuff
didn't think
back.
librarians
But
do
the
this. It's
EBS
very
one,
exciting.
a lot more
librarian.
comfortable with data being persistent through reboots and hiccups and bumps in the night. And then there's different kinds. It's not one size fits all with Amazon. I think, I don't know,
How helpful
Nick,
is the company?
is it 64 cores? What's the biggest now? Do you know?
Some of the things that I never
Anyway, it
thought
used
would
to-
have been
32
would have
cores.
been incredibly
Okay.
useful.
So,
were useful.
so
Like I
you
went
can.
to the,
So the biggest instance you can
the
get
session
in
on
Amazon right now is a
making
30
ebooks
core,
out of your
or is
law
a
review
32
articles.
core
Would you think that
instance.
would be
and
relevant?
You have 32
Not
processing
necessarily.
cores.
However, we do a lot
It's
of,
also
at the firm,
expensive.
we do a lot of,
But you have different sizes, and when you initially start them,
we typically just, they just
when
tell
you
us
initially
what
start
they
the
want
instance, you
and
say
do it. So,
how big.
so a lot of the times
What
we
is it?
create like reports on
30.
things, and we compile a whole bunch of information from various places and write up things.
Whatever.
And everybody wants access to it.
It's like the value. They keep adding value, and they're doing it incrementally.
The law review article, creating ebooks out of your law review
and
articles. Perfect.
Yeah, $2. Let's see, $2.10 an hour
you get
just
more
for just to
from
have it
them?
running. Just to have it running. That doesn't include I/O or network traffic rather. And then you also have, not only do you have the different cores, we have different sizes of memory. So if you have something that requires more memory than it does CPU, you can start that kind of instance. And then you have really helpful people like RightScale or people out in the community that will generate an instance for you, size it properly, and say this is how many cores and how many. So for instance, if you're going to run a Postgres, God forbid, a Postgres instance, you would have it. You would have a recommended instance, a recommended AMI for that. So when you started, it would be sized properly. Postgres would be installed, pretty much be ready to go.
So it's interesting to see.
And then the other interesting thing about, or the other actually cool thing, well, there's a lot of cool things, but the one I have here is that you have something called elastic IPs. And again, I'm sorry if I'm repeating this and you guys.
I was going to say, how I started the other session. How many people
With
are
Amazon,
librarians?
whenever you start an instance, you get an IP that
How
they give
many
you.
are professors?
They own it. If you reboot
then
that
how many are
instance,
IT?
you'll very likely lose that IP address and get
I thought you
another
were
one.
gonna keep your hand up the whole
So in
time,
order
Ken.
for you to be able to map your DNS to stuff out in the Amazon cloud, included in your your monthly bill, you can have up to 5 elastic IP addresses, which they don't actually bill you for unless you
definitely
use.
would be a
So you can
slightly
kind of grab
librarian-heavy
them.
crowd
Actually,
today,
they bill you for
it's
them
pretty evenly
unless
matched
you're
or
using them.
Yes.
So you can grab these
I have
five
a topic to
IP addresses,
ask
and you
about.
can actually petition
How
them
do
to get more.
folks get their
and then as you make
colleagues,
instance, you can associate this IP address with
or
it.
more
And then if you
seasoned
need
law
to do something like
librarians
build
or
this with,
partners at law firms? How
Okay,
do you
they raised
get
the fund,
people
it's
who have been
115.
doing something for a
You know
long
what it is.
time to adopt new technology or a new way?
Yeah, no. Yeah, I think I asked for 20, and I don't think I have popped over the. I have nowhere near 20%.
That when I first got there 10 years ago, he used WordPerfect 5.1 and would not give it up. Okay.
Yeah, and they're real generous with their stuff.
That
I mean,
I have found you can do that.
So,
is to
anyway, so these IP addresses, you sign them to your
ways
instance,
to
and then you
introduce
map
them
your
to it,
DNS to that, and then
then
if
step
you
away.
need to move that domain
The more
somewhere
times
else,
you
instead of
introduce
moving,
them,
instead of going through the DNS
introduce them to
switcheroo,
it
you
without
can just
giving
kind
them
of
a feeling of
you
pressure
just take
that
that
something
IP address
you
and
have
assign
to
it to a
do,
different instance, and that's
the more
where
likely they are
that's
to
where that traffic will
eventually
go now.
put
It's great if
their
you have
toe
a
in the
server
water.
go
And
down,
once their toe's
or
in
if
the
you're
water,
building
then
something
they
in
slide
parallel and
right
you want
on
to
in
switch
and
it
start
over
swimming.
instead, you can do
But
it
you have
instantaneously
to
instead of waiting
just
for the DNS to
give
prompt
them
you.
crumbs to get them to start eating. Okay?
Yeah, I know. The storage for Amazon, I talked about it a little earlier. It's called we call it the elastic block storage.
It's
just attached storage. I mean, it's just like if you plug the disk into a running server.
So how do you
honestly, I
approach
don't know
your
what the upper
dean to
limit
get
is.
something adopted?
Again, they're
Do you
pretty
stalk,
generous with it. I
lurk?
don't know that I've ever hit it because I don't run terabyte
It
size
varies.
things.
Like for iPads, we actually had two professors that were
EBSs.
very interested
You
in
create them as you need
but
them.
no one was
You attach
until
them to the
one of the
instance.
professors started
In our
showing
case,
the dean everything
I'm
he
a
could
Linux
do.
guy. We're a Linux
And all of a
shop.
sudden the dean went out
So
and
they
bought them,
attach to a device.
and now
And
we
then from
expect
that device,
many
you then
more
format it
in
however
the
you want
law
it, mount
school.
it, and it stays mounted. You can have it reattach to that. You can slave it to that instance so that if that instance reboots or restarts, it reattaches automatically to that instance. And then internally to that operating system, you have to then go ahead and mount it from wherever you've got. So if you do go ahead and reboot it, you can have it automatically come back. Or not. The other thing about the EBS storage
try
is that you can do
emails?
something called
Do you take
snapshots
people,
with them.
like a group
One of
brown
the later
bag
slides
lunch?
is some of the challenges that you face when you go to
any
cloud
other
architecture.
ideas?
And one of the things that you can do
I
with
can tell you we
EBS
did brown
stores
bags a lot.
is you can
I
snapshot
mean, it was more of the faculty kind of
and
trained each
you
other,
really
but
should use
every now and
something
then the
like the
libraries,
XFS, the extended file system,
IT
to do
would
it
get
so
in
that
there
it can lock the
and
data
kind of show
and you
some
won't
new
get
product
corruption,
or something
although
new we've
not
discovered.
really clear where that would happen on
Then,
anything
they
but the
kind of
root
intermix that with their
partition. But
faculty research.
what that allows you to do
tables and-
is you can do it either manually or automatically through a script, and you
Not
just
great
take a snapshot
success
of
with
that
those
EBS
kinds
and you
of
store it out in
approaches
the
that
Amazon S3
thing that
storage,
involves
so that if for some
gathering a
reason
faculty
some
member
horrible thing befalls you,
same members
and you
in
need
the
to get that
same
data
room,
back,
thus
you can
admitting
you
to
can
one
blow away
another
that
that they
EBS
don't
store
already
and
know
then just
about
attach
something.
the snapshot that you made 10 minutes ago. And
or online
it's
for
much the
private
way that
consumption
the
is better
financials
received.
used to do their stuff, so that you don't lose more than 10 minutes of data. You can make a snapshot every 10 minutes, rotate them throughout the day.
We are going
So
to be
if you
trying
do have something
one
that
new
really
thing
goes down,
this
you
year.
have some super
We're getting
mission critical
a new
data.
director
You won't
who likes to
tend not
throw
to lose more than 10
parties.
minutes of it, unless
And we are
something really
also
bad
buying
happens
the
in the cloud, and that
Bluepress
happened.
IR, which we hope to have samples of by September.
What we have,
And
we
right
have the
now
graphic I
they're
will not
tossing
show.
back and forth the idea of having
And I
a
say this
wine and
because
cheese
it induces
reception for the
seizures in a
faculty
susceptible
and
segment of the
having
population.
the IR
It's-
profiles
and I don't even
that
have it on the
we
laptop.
do as mock-ups
It's our architecture
up on the
out
board
in
so
the
they can
cloud.
see
And,
other professors on there while gathering.
it all started, like I said, in 2008 as just a harmless experiment.
So we're hoping to have a good turnout for that.
And then you soon realize that Amazon's standing on a corner
we've
wearing a
found
trench coat,
is
telling you he's got
sometimes
good
there's a
stuff, and he'll
culture
give you a little sample of
within
it.
the school
All you got to do is
that
just try
is
it, baby. Just
both
try it.
individually and
And now what
collectively
we've pretty much done
self-deprecating
is
among,
replicated our entire
certain
infrastructure,
groups.
for the most part, out in the Amazon
Yeah,
cloud.
I'm interested in that
The
new
two
technology
things
you're
I think
using,
we're lacking,
but the rest of my
that we still have
colleagues
brick and
aren't ready
mortar
for that.
is a factory server.
And
just 'cause
each
I
of them
haven't gotten around to it
individually
yet.
comes to us and says
And
that,
also because I don't know if I
or
wanna
you hear that enough times,
that one chugs
and
pretty
it's a
hard.
trick of getting
And
beyond
also
that
the,
culture of,
And we have an older staging
I'm willing to
server
try
that
the new
is for
thing, but I don't
flat,
think my
HTML
colleagues
stuff.
are ready
that hasn't
for
been
it.
put out there yet, but that one may got to
And
pasture soon.
we've had some luck getting through that, but no matter how many times we have successes getting beyond
what
it
happened
on
was
an
we got
individual
into,
piece of technology,
we started doing
there
the cloud
still
stuff
seems to be
just
that
before,
underlying
or just
current.
as
And,
we were
and,
starting to
and getting
move from
beyond it
our flat
and getting our,
kind of,
our faculty
HTML
to
certified
recognize
Apache,
that they really
to
are
CMS
very proficient
infrastructure,
at
which
picking up
wound
new
being
technologies
Drupal.
and using them.
And it
has
turns
been
out
an
that
interesting component of what you were
The more we
asking
built,
about.
the more we found that we liked it. It was a little bit like crack for sysadmins, and the more, but the more we needed, and we I try to be very.
I'll talk with you at the break then, if I may.
And so
Like
I was
Nixon
very
case
conservative
resulted
first,
in a 14-minute
only
gap
building
at
what
the
we
end
needed,
conference, and then we
trying not to replicate too much stuff. But as we wound up going, we wound up moving along, we decided that it really was a pretty decent platform for what we were doing.
Any other topics
And
that
we
we
now
should
have
talk
an
about
excess
publicly?
of 11 instances running and doing a variety of things. That's actually a little
I have a
disingenuous.
topic and it
We have
relates
a few
to
more than
this
that.
conference.
We have
Is anybody
our
new
entire
in
development
here?
operation,
Recognize most of the
for the most
faces?
part. What?
We got a couple new. So how do you guys think we can get
How many
people like you?
We have
newbies
no,
coming to the conference.
No, because what we also have is Dan's super secret playground in the cloud. But what happened? But I mean, but Tom makes about. No, but Tom makes a valid point.
I'm hoping that my boss will allow me to
Amazon
come back
started- I
next
don't
year.
digress too much, but Amazon
My
started letting you run
perception,
micro instances,
having not
which are
yet
really
watched
tiny,
the
low-cost
YouTube
instances,
video of the
which is
presentation I
great if you're
did,
trying to
was
swat
that
a
I think we
particular
did a pretty good job. I may get back and view it and hide my head
some
in
bizarre reason,
embarrassment.
At the LI recently, I've gotten to
I
mod
don't feel
rewrite
that as
endlessly.
a member of the IT
Every
staff
project, next project I go to
within
is
my
something to do with mod rewrite.
school
It's destroying my brain.
that I was aware of as many things that
But
CALI
it was
is
very,
doing.
very helpful.
I know that my director
The ball peen hammer, I
participates
keep
with
in mind.
CALI and is much more aware.
But it was very
But
helpful. to start a
my
micro
personal
instance so that I
awareness
could
of what
replicate
CALI
only what I
does
needed. I
was-
didn't have to replicate the
has been
entire
really raised by
architecture.
this
Only what I
conference.
needed with a little
I
micro
attended some
instance.
sessions
It
where
burst into
that,
existence
where I scribbled
for a
down things.
week, and
I've got to
then
go
it
back
goes
and
away.
really spend some time on
So
the CALI site.
when Tom wants the
It's
exact
a
answer
valuable
to how
thing.
many
I need
instances
to
are running
look
at
at
any
it.
one point in time,
And I
it
think
depends on exactly how sharded
if my
the
pattern is
individual
at
LIs,
all replicated in other schools,
staff members'
getting some of
personalities
those
are at that
people
point in time. As to what
beyond
it
your
is.
initial contacts at those schools to become aware. I don't interact with the teaching
Oh, yeah, the
resources that
feeling
you
of dread.
provide because
So I
I'm not
talked-
interacting with the students in the
The feeling
capacity
of
where
dread
they're
that you get
interacting
when.
with those things.
So I'm an old school. I mean,
I was aware. CALI is an
I've been
organization.
listening
My
for a long
boss
time,
has
and
gone to the
outsourced
presentations
in
before.
my
A colleague
very
has
little
gone.
of my stuff. I always kept
but
it very
I
close at
really
hand.
feel-
I don't consider myself to be a control freak. I just consider myself to be pragmatic. It was the most cost effective, most cost effective way for whatever organization I was attached to do our tech at the time. And then when you finally take it and you put it out in the cloud and you look at it and you admire it and you're like, oh, that is so cool. Holy crap! I can no longer go in the server room and look at the little yellow lights or the little green light, hopefully all green, on all your stuff, or it's the horse and buggy show when everything goes down. You get in your car, you ride to the thing, you turn on, and you kind of lack that control. And seceding that kind of control is difficult for somebody who, like me, didn't start out that way. But then all of a sudden you realize that, oh wait, it's new and it's shiny, and that feeling of dread quickly evaporates when somebody's shaking like the shiny bauble over here, and you're like, ooh, now I can touch it. And then it slowly degrades into the Homer Simpson-like state of Zen where you're just going, the cloud.
Vegas was real popular.
I watch a lot of science fiction.
Especially for the IT people, what other
This
professional
quote,
development
I think I got it
opportunities do
right,
you
is
have?
from Blade Runner.
Are there other,
and
or do you go to any
when
other
the
conferences, or would you
protagonist
go
is
to any
talking,
other conferences?
when the protagonist trying to get him to say that he doesn't like replicas.
I would go to other
And he replies,
conferences,
well,
honestly, for
they're either a
time,
benefit
this
or
is the only
hazard.
one that I go to.
When they're a benefit, they're not my problem. So that was kind of the
My boss goes to
philosophy I
SACS.
took, or that we took,
and
collectively when we
professional
started looking at
development,
this
we
stuff
get
out in the cloud. Is it a benefit or is it a hazard?
software
What
packages.
was the cost? What's the cost of learning it? Is it more
You'd have to
stable?
ask him.
What does it get us?
SACS.
Well, so we'll go with the hazards. Well, you lose some of your control. That feeling of dread that I talked about earlier. You have to, the learning curve, you have to figure out new ways of doing things.
Did
Once
LSAC
you get the
pull the
instance
plug
running,
on their SCON?
and you get to your first
Didn't
command
it
line,
snow in March,
there's a you are
next
at
year?
ease.
Okay, so
but
they're
it's that
gone
whole
biannual
idea of
or
now
something.
you're managing your servers instead of opening the door into the server room and sticking your hand in and making sure the temperature's still okay. You're relying on
Is
somebody else to
everybody
do
on
that.
Technoids?
Right?
Because I was wondering if that was another way to kind of let people
So you have to
know
kind of
what
let go a
CALI
little bit. And then
does
there's
in
the
different
managing your
areas.
server from the server console, or you're managing all your instances from a dashboard. What's the health of them? How much I/O you got? I mean, what's going in and out? It's just a new way of learning to do stuff. Backups are a little more difficult out in the cloud. The best way to do it is to take the snapshots of the EBS stores as you're going along. Snapshot them. It's just how much pain you can stand. We snapshot them 3 times a day, every 10 minutes, once a day. It's how much data you can stand to lose. But that still keeps your data only in the cloud. At some point, you got to go in and take that data back to something brick and mortar. At least that's what we do. I mean, you have to. I mean, there's no other way I'm comfortable doing it. And therefore, the preferred way is the EBS stores. We also have it where I just tar gzip stuff up using a script every couple hours, stick it over somewhere, and then once a night drag all that stuff down. We do incur the I/O cost for it. It is a cost worth expending. I mean, if you had to build something from bare metal, that's the only way you're going to get your data back. Email, caveat to email, note to self, had this come up in a fundraising campaign at the worst possible time a couple years ago. Turns out that the real-time black hole people that maintain real-time black hole lists for spam really don't like the Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud.
Then you would use
for obvious
Dropbox.
reasons.
There are no legal citations in
They
Google
block
Docs.
the whole thing.
So
if they see
anybody
any
who's used
mail
Google
traffic
Docs
coming from an IP address that they know
and
is
dealt
in
with
the
the
Amazon
formatting
cloud,
issues,
it
it doesn't
automatically puts them in the
directly
entire
support
connection, not the message
legal
that goes through, it'll
citations.
just stop
And then
right
also,
there.
if you're using both of these, then you will, of course, come across the one through document.
Google
Is it the
doesn't.
version that's on
Some
Google
use Gmail,
Docs
it tends to
that
be
you've
okay.
opened?
But if you're trying to
Is it
send out a
the
list of
version on Dropbox
4,000
that your
donors,
collaborator is working
and
on?
you're watching the mail logs and wondering why the hell this stuff ain't going,
Model
you
number
quickly
two
find out that they have
is
that
the person
sending
who
email from the cloud
says,
is a problem. If
all
you
that is
really
great,
want-
but I still require that face-to-face interaction.
Yeah. Well, no,
And so
we can do the whitelist if you want.
What we've done is
Yeah,
that
I mean,
we've
you
taken
can
Google
try to
Docs
you can do
and
the whitelist
Dropbox.
thing so that it will
And
actually.
now we've added
Or try to get
Skype
it go
or
through.
FaceTime.
You can also do
Who here
kind of like
is
proxy mail,
familiar
like mail gateways.
with Skype
If it's
and
really,
or
really
FaceTime?
important stuff,
Okay.
if you really like
So-
your cloud-based
As you can tell,
email system,
the pros
you still
would
have
be
to
the
have
same
something brick and
benefits
mortar you
as
can
Google
get it
Docs
through.
and Dropbox,
You can pay other
plus
services
the
to kind of
ability
walk
to
free
have
on a
face-to-face.
message-by-message basis, but
You
it gets really
can
expensive to do.
then be able
Elmer,
to
do you want to say something about whitelist?
is that exactly what they were thinking of when
Yes,
you pulled up
Amazon.
this document?
The,
Is there
of
something
course,
else
because
that
it's so easy to
that
build
you could
stuff,
possibly research
a lot of
on the
spam
spot,
stuff
and
gets
have them
in the
tell you
cloud.
have
So
no
that's why the
communication.
real-time black hole people dump all the email.
At that point, you can have it
If you
happen in
have
real time.
an elastic IP address, you can get Amazon to put you on the list that they give to the real-time black hole people that's supposed to effectively whitelist your servers so that the mail gets through. That's probably about 90% effective. I mean, we still run into issues where occasionally the IP address will end up will turn up again on another list. The other thing that can happen is I also run mail off of a server that isn't on Amazon's whitelist, but it doesn't get used a lot. But what happens with that one is that occasionally that IP address actually ends up in places like online lists of open proxies and things, and so that that is sort of a downside. But.
And the way spam is done these days, since a lot of it, since they kind of use an algorithm, the fact that it came from an IP address in the Amazon cloud, even if it's whitelisted, factors very likely negatively into the fact that your mail will actually get through. So you have to watch out for the mail. And, of course, then the billing. Now you're paying. And we actually talked to Amazon about this before because one of the only ways Amazon will take payment from you is with a credit card. And that's difficult if you have a large organization. It's okay, I have a P card, it goes to $500. Well, the minute that I get an over the $500 a month charge on the card, then it's not going to pay for it. So you have to find somebody in your organization that has one of the big purchasing cards. Amazon alluded to the fact that they would start to, have you talked to them about this? Doing billing, like invoicing. Yeah, we were talking to the marketing guy a little while ago, and he said something that I guess they're trying to get it done. But they're really, and as to that, we did a case study for Amazon a little while ago. The cost that you're paying for this, they make the margin, their profit margin on it is apparently very, very slim. They're just trying to get people to adopt it. We were trying to, since we're kind of a nonprofit, we're trying to get them to kind of an in-kind donation. They would just give us our service. They really can't. They make virtually no money on this stuff, apparently. Or at least that's what they would have you believe. But having said that, you're still paying for it. And it still can be expensive. You can prepay. You can buy an instance. So if you know you're gonna have an instance running all the time, you can prepay for that instance, get a cheaper price, and defray some of your monthly bill is then lower. You just paid it ahead of time, but you've paid less for it, and that helps. you watch your bandwidth. The other thing that if you're talking to other instances, other Amazon instances out in the Amazon cloud, if you talk using their it's a multi-homed. If you talk using the internal, if you're doing network commo using the internal network, you don't get banged for that bandwidth. If you're in the same geographic bucket.
What percentage of a hardware setup would you say you're spending on a monthly or annual basis to maintain the cloud architecture?
Well, I spend almost all my hardware allotment every year. So we build just like, so the first year that we did it, and we've outgrown it now. The first year we did it, I was going to have to replace two $12,000 servers, one $8,000 server, and a couple of very small back-end ones. So what I have budgeted every month in my budget for it is between $2,200 and $2,500 for that. If you take that over what it costs us to replace that hardware, in about it didn't really save us any money per se. What it did is it normalized the cost. So I don't really have to worry about new hardware anymore. Everything becomes more or less predictable. We are very conscious now when we start a new instance up that it's going to cost us to do so. So we're kind of judicious about doing it.
Yeah, just to elaborate on something that Dan said, when we went into it, he and I talked it over, and I said, if we can get this in even under 15% above what we're paying for physical hardware now, it's actually worth it. Because in our budgeting setup, particularly with the, shall we say, sparse information that we've been getting from central administration over the last couple of years as they try to figure out whether they have an endowment or not, everybody is now budgeting on a steady state 5% up, 5% down, 10% up, 10% down thing. It really doesn't make any sense for us, particularly for this kind of expense, because it's all traffic driven. But what was happening to us with physical hardware budgets was that there was this kind of feedback loop getting set up, where in certain years we would end up replacing a lot of hardware. Our allocation would go up the next year because we'd done that. We wouldn't need it. We'd cut it, and just at the point where we'd cut it, we're back. Yeah, I see Ben nodding because he's played this game at Emory, presumably, and I think it probably sounds pretty familiar to anybody who's in a university. Well, this very much offers a way out of that. You can look at that and say, well, what's my traffic looking like normally? And the costs become highly predictable, and for one reason or another, that makes everybody's life just a lot easier. And to me personally, that was worth about 15%. I don't know what your number would be, and I suspect that if you're more limited traffic environment than we are, it's even easier than that. Yeah. We get slash dotted on a fairly regular basis every time the Supreme Court does something somebody's interested in.
Yeah. And in the olden days, just before we went to the cloud, Cornell would impose a bandwidth tax on us. So just before, maybe a year before we went to the cloud, they stopped hitting us with the bandwidth tax. They were punishing us for success, right? For the most part. I mean, we were tracking a lot of traffic and we were getting banged for it. Did that answer your question? Okay. But the payoff for moving stuff out to the cloud, and I can't stress this enough, it really does lower the bar for innovation. I mean, I talked about the micro instances a minute ago. Not only are they good for solving problems, but they're good for prototyping stuff, especially dangerous stuff that where you're working, you're custom compiling this, or you're screwing around with that particular language. And it really does work for that. You have access to more and better technology. You get out of the mean failure loop. You get out of the constantly updating hardware loop. If you have an instance that's been running for a year, you bake an image out of it, restart it. Now you're on with the new large instances, whatever that is. 12 cores, 16 cores. It's eminently scalable. I don't have a cluster running yet. The cluster is in the works just after I have one project I have to complete, and the next thing I'm going to do is clusterize stuff. Elmer has a cluster for doing his classes. We're running on one big instance and a backup to that one that's also running this, but it's not live, that I can switch to if it should fail. And that seems to work for us right now as we build out our architecture and see what we need. If you do it right, it's redundant. You kind of have these geographical availability zones. One of the things the outage taught us, and I'll talk about it real briefly, I can talk about it now, is that you should kind of have stuff in different availability zones. There's US East-West, US East, US East, US West. And you should kind of move stuff around so you don't have it all in one spot. And also regional access, which is nice. So you can run stuff on the West Coast, keep your West Coast traffic West Coast, run stuff on the East Coast, keep East Coast traffic East Coast. And then Amazon also has something called CloudFront, which serves up content. It's content serving. So, and then you'll automatically download the ginormous PDF from whatever source is closer to you. Okay, so we at the LI, we constantly keep saying the acronym CFR, because we've been doing for like the past, I don't know, most of our lives, I guess. Yeah, it seems like it. It really does sometimes. But that project was the first LI project done totally in the cloud. The stuff that we moved over before that had been running on a CMS sitting on brick and mortar that we just picked up and moved. The CFR project was the first thing we'd done ground up from the cloud. Real brief, because we talk about this a lot, and I'm sure you've all heard it. We get XML from the feds, tidy it up. We load it in something called an exist database, which is an XML database. Then at some point we take it back out of exist and stick it into Drupal, where it's crammed into HTML, crammed into MySQL, and the HTML is made. And then from Drupal we serve it out to a hapless user who happily does whatever they do with it. But occasionally stuff goes wrong. And like I said, I've watched a lot of science fiction. I don't want to read it, but that's the quote from Fifth Element when he's talking about how destruction breeds innovation. So at some point, we had stuff go a little sideways on us in the cloud. And the reason I'm going through all this exercise because the EC2 really did kind of save us at this point. When we built this, we had no idea how well it was going to scale or not scale. When we built the CFR, it was the technology existed, but it had never been used in the way that we were using it. Not that big exist databases weren't there before, but I don't think they were holding arcane CFR data. And then we were writing as were what it was doing, as what the technology was doing on Drupal to get the stuff out of XML and start serving out. We had no data points, no benchmarks. And at some point in our little lives, and in this kind of adventure we were going through, the exist database became corrupt. Turns out, exists a Java base, which we knew, and Java has memory limits, which we also knew. But what we didn't know was that when exist hit a certain memory limit, and this happened when we were cramming stuff into exist, it writes corruption into the database. Remarks about it in some really, really out-of-the-way log, and happily goes on its merry way. And you have no red flag, nothing crashes, no white screen of death, nothing goes off, and you really got to kind of dig for it in that real chatty Java log to find out what the hell just happened. And what just happened was it was a heap error. And what exist will do is, and I don't want to get too far, but what exist will do is, in order to correct for that corruption, when it makes its backup and does a consistency check, it just takes that data and throws it out. So you have a perfectly wonderful backup with just no corruption in it whatsoever, because it just kicked the crap out. And so you're missing data. So if you restore from backup to try and fix your corruption problem, yeah, then it works, but you got crap that's missing. It took us a while to figure that one out. So failure analysis. Again, I was trying to be good about our resources out there, because again, this stuff does cost us money. So what I did is I had sized the exist instance too small, and I had made it 32-bit. And turns out, I'm not really a Java person either, although I have learned. Fortunately, I have learned that you can only set the heap error to around, I think it's 4 gig. On a 32-bit instance. So no matter how high I would set it for what we were doing, I would continuously get the heap errors, I would continuously get corruption, and we would continuously get this little endless loop. And so, yeah, there's only so much instance memory you can have on a 32-bit system. And the only solution to that was to smack it with a bigger stick. At this point, the only way to get around it was to get rid of the 32-bit system and run a 64-bit system. And if I had to do that on brick and mortar, it would have been, I would have had to order a new server, or I would have had based on the hardware we had at the time, there was no solution to that problem. The solution was to order another server to make this all work. So what we really did is we just right-sized the instance. We took the exist data was, once we got it stable and realized what we were missing, we had a relatively clean database. We could always reinstantiate, which is a laborious process for us. So we just, 64-bit instance, we tuned up exist, which turns out comes it comes out pre-configured for a MacBook, yeah. Cold rage is to describe when I finally, because it's not like they said, this is configured for a MacBook when you open it up and are going through the little configuration. So what we did is we right-sized the instance, tunes exist, and then we profited, which we haven't done yet, but we're trying. And then and it was much easier in the dynamic environment that was the EC2 cloud than what it would have been on our brick and mortar stuff. And this whole project too, we have continued to have to right-size the stuff. The MySQL instance was underpowered. Turns out it was big, but it was underpowered and it was doing other stuff. And we really did need to have it all by itself. So, in tuning it, it took me a couple days to tune the instance properly, and it was much easier to run something in parallel, which I was able to do using Amazon. We built it, got it ready for prime time, and the whole reason that we do this, and this was all just for what was going to be a beta release, and still is a beta release. But and Tom and Sarah Fond, very, 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 very good at reminding us that you only get really one shot at these people's eyeballs. I mean, if you're going to show them, these are government people who don't have a lot of extra time, and really they look at us as the crazy people at Cornell doing stuff. So you're only really going to get one chance for them to look at this. So it's got to kind of work the first time they see it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you can write beta over as much as you want. But it's got to kind of perform pretty close to what they want. So dead stuff doesn't work. You kind of got to get it right. And so that's why we didn't want a query to take 10 seconds to return. I mean, just touching briefly on other stuff we're doing out in the cloud. Solar, I don't want to get into it too much. Again, with the scaling issues, Nick told us a cautionary tale, so we are learning from his early mistakes on how to scale it properly. We just did Solar multi-core, have it on Tomcat, again, sitting on its own server, and so that we could actually run Solar in two different places, one for just CFR, and then one so that we can build it so that it is now scalable. And we're still feeling around for our scaling issues on that. Oh, we already talked about this.
Yeah, don't send 100 gigs to one Solar instance and expect it to search it quickly.
Right. So yeah, you found it. Yeah. And I don't know. Did you ever find a record limit to that? Do you have a limit on how many records there were? Or you don't know how many records. It was just the size limit that you hit.
I think it's the size limit. I think it was just sheer the max amount of
data. Yeah.
One time.
Yeah.
We're going to launch the shards next week.
Yeah. So again, but there's a solution to that problem. But again, we went down the road of Solar almost simultaneously, and they started cramming more data into it than we did quicker and hit that limit. So because of that, now what we did out in the cloud is we were able to spawn a second instance so that we could do what we really need to do with Solar instead of just our kind of baby steps with it. And again, we already talked about the dollars a little minute ago, so I don't want to talk about it again, except for the last point, because for us, being out in the cloud, the alternative for a lot of the stuff that we did was honestly, when you started looking at it, and if we hold one of our rare but entertaining spec meetings, it would have been not to do it. I mean, the cost would have been so prohibitive, we would have had to buy the hardware to do it. If we knew what we needed, even if we knew what we needed when we started doing our CFR project, as far as hardware cost, we probably wouldn't have done it. I mean, I say that from a system standpoint, we probably would have been made to do it somehow. But from a hardware standpoint, it would have been. But from a hardware standpoint, it would have been the cost would have been astronomical to replace the brick and mortar stuff, and then to scale it properly, even if we got it right the first time. No, you're okay. You're okay. You're okay. The ugly, I just mentioned it to mention it because it was in the news, I don't know, April, right? April 20. Amazon had a big outage. I know Elmer lost stuff for a while, a day or so. Nick, did you lose anything? I don't know.
We lost our backup Solar server.
Yeah.
Which was a big deal.
Now, did you lose data? Like there was 5% of people that lost data. Are you one of those 5% that lost data permanently or not?
We lost instances that it wouldn't let us shut down because they were running off of EBS, so we couldn't even terminate the instance.
Yeah.
That gave us a problem in the fact that we couldn't move the
Wouldn't let it go. Yeah. So yeah, it was a.
We basically end up having to launch a new server with a new IP, re-DNS.
Yeah.
And we lost that, and we lost one of our slave database servers.
Right.
Just locked up. It was you could read from it, you just couldn't write.
Couldn't write to it. Yeah.
So it started lagging behind everything else, and we got people calling up. It was right the day we launched our case law summary newsletter. It was like, I subscribed, and then it comes back and says that I'm not subscribed.
Yeah. That's a little embarrassing, actually. But it's embarrassing to everybody who relied on Amazon that day. I mean, I think Foursquare went down. I forget who else went down. There was, for that one, some permanent data loss, I think. I said 5%. I think it may be 3% of people permanently lost data off of EBS stores, which is why, again, it was so important to have snapshots and stuff backed up back down to some brick and mortar server somewhere. So the lessons learned from that, again, was snapshot your EBS stores, diversify your zones so that you're not all in one availability zone, because it only affected US Zone East. And then even then, once they cleaned everything up, it affected only one sub-zone kind of in that availability zone, and then make your backups to brick and mortar. Next for us, what we're doing is US code. We kind of been down this road with CFR before, so the architecture is kind of known, and so we kind of know what to expect with it. And then we have a visiting scholar from Spain who's doing work with triple stores right now, and I have no idea. And that's to do to enhance our search efficiency, kind of natural language recognition search and stuff. And I have no idea how that's going to scale. So we're going to build all that out in the cloud too, so that if we need to ramp it up, we can at least see what it's going to take to do it. Anyway, so that's hopefully some of the last slides. It's what it's good for: predictable cost, easy to scale. We already did all this stuff. We're not going to talk about it again. So that's all I got. So I can now take any questions if anybody would like to, or you can go snag a decent box lunch before Haywood gets there. Yeah.
So I was talking to someone the other day that is fighting with University Council, which hadn't even occurred to me to ask permission.
Yeah.
About putting any data in the cloud.
We didn't, but maybe a year ago, I don't know, Tom, one of those guys come and talk to us, remember? Yeah, but there are segments on campus that are very envious because we're one of the only folks on campus that can do this, but we don't really keep any private data out there. We don't keep grades, we don't keep, socials, anything like that. And there are people on campus who really would like to do this and kind of, because everybody's running their, it's academia, right? There's fiefdoms all over the place. And so there's people that these guys were really kind of smart, and they figured out this would be a hammer they could kind of use the tool they could use to. So no, we didn't have to fight that battle, and I don't know that it's ever come to fruition. My guess is that that Cornell at some point will start using a service like this, but a lot of the data is going to have to be kept in-house. I mean, the HIPAA stuff and all that jazz is going to have to be kept in-house. So. But done.
Cindy just pushed one of them. I mean, one of them is data confidentiality, and as Dan says, my guess is that at the end of the day, what we're going to end up with is a situation in which the central campus people virtualize a certain amount of stuff to form their own little mini cloud for that stuff over which they really must exercise dominion over security, and then join that to stuff that's hosted out in the cloud if it becomes infrastructurally useful to them to do that, if it actually saves them any money. Or it may be that once they get going on the virtualization effort, they decide simply to do all of it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised to see someone begin selling security as a service in this environment at all, because there are enough of these guys out there now that they'll need differentiators, and that's a pretty obvious one.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is that one of the problems with this, and it's not a problem for us yet, is that everybody hates to optimize code. And everybody hates to do performance tuning. And it's really easy to hit the button that says, get me a bigger instance.
Yeah.
So that this tendency that we've always had as a development shop to throw hardware at stuff that we really should have been a little more conscientious about optimizing, there are some severe temptations there, and I don't think it's going to come down to some sort of engineering management fight over this, but the devil is sitting on my shoulder on this one, right? No question. And I think you really have to be careful about how you run your development at that point and decide, well, okay, is it worth optimizing, or do we just speed the stupid thing up?
And we did go through that exercise when we had the problem with Exist, and then later with the MySQL stuff when we were going through our CFR project. We did. I mean, we went through and we optimized everything before we just smacked it with a bigger piece of hardware. And when that didn't produce an acceptable result, then finally we did start up the separate instances and got the instances the right size. So.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is that if you're going through a site optimization exercise of some kind, it just increases the complexity of what you need to look at, right? Because you've got the option of changing hardware, you've got the option of doing SEO.
That's why I always put that good stewardship thing in there, because it really is just good technology to get everything optimized before. I mean, don't optimize it on the platform you have, move it out to the cloud, then optimize it and see what you need, if you need something bigger. But I would, the cautionary tale is 64-bit it. If you're moving out to the cloud, whatever instance you start, make sure it's a 64-bit instance. You'll get a lot more mileage out of it. You'll have a little problem, depending on what platform we use Linux, with the kind of the 64-bit versus 32-bit libraries that you kind of got to soft link sometimes internally on the file system. But once you get past that, you get a lot more mileage out of 64-bit stuff, and you wind up having less headaches. Elmer?
Yeah, to follow up a little bit on what Tom said about optimization and stuff, the thing about having stuff in the cloud too is that it is that temptation to sort of just throw more hardware at it because it's so easy to do, but it also allows you to follow best practices a lot easier, right? So that you're not looking at when Drupal tells you that it's really happy if it's a separate database from the web server, but you've only got money to buy one server, and then you're like, oh, well, we'll just put on one server, and it doesn't work right. It's easier to get around that sort of stuff when you're because the cloud, in that instance, is easier, and over the long run, might save you a little bit of money, depending on on how you're starting out.
I mean, the difference between success or failure of what you're doing, whether it's actually doable or not. Yeah.
The ability to redirect the DNS in case there's an issue or whatever.
Right.
When they dropped on back in April, did they provide the opportunity for people to say, okay, put that back on my hardware in the interim until they got their system back up?
Well, it depends on the way you manage your DNS. So we don't manage our DNS through Amazon. Usually have a third party. In our case, we have to use Cornell's, but Elmer used somebody else. I mean, there's third-party DNS stuff. So yeah, you could go through and take that host name from that IP address and put it wherever you wanted it, as long as you had control over that DNS process. What Nick was saying was that the IP address, you wouldn't get the same IP address. You have to do it at that DNS level. What Nick was saying was that when the way the instances crashed, it wouldn't release that IP address for you to then move anywhere to anywhere else out in the Amazon cloud, right? So you're kind of stuck.
Left running and couldn't get it off of there.
Yeah, that happens with.
We had 3 servers that crashed, and they all had elastic IPs, but only one of them crashed in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a little weird. That happens sometimes with EBS stores too. That's why it's really important to have snapshots. You'll get an instance that'll go down, and it really doesn't happen that frequently. You have an instance that'll go down, and it won't release the EBS store, and then it'll eventually release. I mean, I've never had one not, but it could take upwards of 24 hours before Amazon cycles through whatever maintenance schedule it has to find stuck stuff and kick it out. Or you can just go to the snapshot you made 10 minutes ago, and off you go.
Yeah, and we were actually hit hard by the April outage, and because it knocked off our all of our web nodes. So we didn't lose any data when it came back, but the thing is that we were able to run a separate instance of our lessons on one of our physical servers, but then we had to wait. The DNS never finished propagating.
Yeah.
By the time the servers came back up anyway. So some people never were able to get through to the lessons anyhow, just because, I know that some name servers, pick up changes pretty quickly. I know there used to be some name servers on certain universities that I used to work at that seemed to cache DNS data for approximately 6 months. Or so before they bother to refresh it. So you know, it sounds nice to say that, like, well, you know, we'll just move to DNS and we'll have, but that makes you feel good, and you can probably get to it pretty quick. But it's not always going to be a really fast solution, you know, anyway.
And then you get an uneven experience on the user side too. As some people get the propagated DNS and some people don't.
That's why, assuming you do control your DNS, one thing I strongly recommend on the cloud, because you may want to move things, is set your TTL very low.
Yeah. Yeah, we do too. Yeah.
I said, I mean, one thing that we do internally, as far as the servers resolving each other, because trying to remember all the internal IP addresses
Right.
is crazy, is I have the TTL on those internal host names set at 100 seconds. So that, and I set those servers not to use a cache.
Right.
Server.
Right.
So that, you know, these servers that are constantly trying to access each other, they end up resolving the, you know, catching what I'm moving things to very quickly.
Yeah.
And for external people, you know, I make sure that when I run two load balancers, I'm not running in the same availability zone.
Right.
So that the worst thing that could happen is, and I run it round robin DNS, so that if one of them does completely totally fail and I can't move it over that quickly, odds are the other one hasn't failed at the same time.
Again, running stuff in different availability zones, kind of maximize your time up.
Can you just say? Sorry. Can you just say one more thing about the availability zones? When you were saying the regional optimization allows you to put stuff in the east or in the west, you're actually paying for a new instance to live out there, and it's just of the web server for load balancing purposes?
Yeah, and you really should do that, and you can do the same thing with back in MySQL stuff too.
Okay.
Because, I mean, if, you know, there's an earthquake and it hits the West Coast availability zone and California caps off and falls into the ocean, you'll still have stuff in the, you know, the rest of the world can still see your stuff.
I don't really care about
Some people don't. But no, but it's also good. But it's not just that level of catastrophe. That the April outage showed that, you know, that affected only U.S. East. U.S. West was fine. But
and only one part of U.S. East.
Yeah.
We've alluded to this a couple of times, but a lot of the expenses is in IL and in bandwidth. So the incremental expense of putting an idling instance out there is actually not that.
No, it's really not. Or if it splits your traffic, you're still, yeah. There's very little overhead. So.
What's an instance costing you?
Well, you just, you know, per hour for the largest instance they got is $2.10. Was that per day or per hour? That was per hour. Per hour, yeah. But that's the big. And
the smallest one is 2 cents an hour.
Yeah, and those are the little micro instances, the ones that you kind of use as a bug swatter, you know, the fly swatter. Yeah, it can get pricey, but that's for the biggest instance ever. I mean, that's if you're doing like, you know, like Hadoop.
That one's actually technically not an instance. It's actually a cluster of instances.
Right. Yeah. No.
Put together with this prefab Hadoop system.
Yeah.
And we run. We've got 16 instances total right now. Plus I store about a half a dozen. We're going to have to ramp stuff up. And it's costing us about $1,200 a month.
Yeah. We're running larger instances probably, so ours is a little higher.
And the thing is because it works really well for us also because we don't have anywhere where we can stash 15 servers.
Yeah.
We're running about 93 servers right now on instances in the cloud, and it's costing us $26,000 a month.
Yeah.
So.
But you're in this valley, man. You're supposed to have that cash flow. Thank you all.
And I constantly get these things back.
Is that from the pugs? That's that from the pugs telling you're cutting into their kibble money? Daddy needs cash for kibble.
CFR Project, how does it work?
How does the CFR project work? The actual person to ask is you just want the overall. How does that get? We get the data from GPO. It's XML data. We get it right from GPO. We we clean it up because it's kind of dirty when we first get it. It doesn't always come clean. Put it in an XML database. From that XML database, we then have written a custom module in Drupal, which is CMS. We extract it from there. Once it's in Drupal, it makes the Drupal is what kind of generates the HTML for us and sticks it in a MySQL database, and that's where that data is served from. So when we go through an update cycle, what will happen is XML comes through, we blow away the node, which is the data in Drupal, and then we tell it to reinstantiate from XML.
So what would the public see?
They would go to Drupal and they would see they would go to our CMS, which is Drupal, and they would see the US the entire US code. Yeah, and it's searchable currently using Solar, and again it's in its beta stage, and you can take a look at it if you want. It's labs.lada Cornell.edu is the host name, and you take a look at it. There's a lot of work that went into it. It looks pretty decent. Yeah, yeah, you're welcome.
Gear. I'm going to go up to 433 and get the laptop and that stuff. It never got put out this morning, I think, because I didn't do it.
And I got distracted with it.
Yeah, well, you had a few things.
Yeah, it's okay.
Are you going to take it back?
I shall, yeah. That's no problem.
Let me go grab it. And,
well, no, I'll come up with it. It's fine. I'm not.
Going to 430 so I can get there, since we're most of the way there already.
Lunch. Plenary. I think we're done. Just leave the monitor. It belongs here.
I don't know about the cookies.